Hello, hello. Hello, you are here at Under the Hood, Friday office hour. This is a space for aspiring, current, or retired STEM students, professionals, or the friends and family of those people. So I'm coming to you live, not from my usual location. I'm trying to balance multiple responsibilities, and I think this is the best way that I can do that. So it's great to see everyone after a somewhat longer hiatus due to professional responsibilities. And so I'm here to talk about some tips that I think are important to discuss because it is conference season and it is job application season. So I wanted to get those thoughts out there as soon as possible. Also, just as a disclaimer, I will not discuss Title IX issues on this platform. And also, the thoughts that I present here do not represent that of my institution, both present and past. So let's jump right into the topics that I wanted to discuss today. Number one, diversity, equity, and inclusion statements. This will mean more for people that are applying for faculty positions than anyone else. Nowadays and currently, search committees are asking for DEI statements as part of your faculty application. From for, from my knowledge, these statements are required in most people's calls for faculty. If they are not required and they are labeled as optional, I still recommend going ahead and submitting that essay. So let's talk about best practices for your DEI statement. Number one, you should shoot for about 2 to 3 pages. I think that represents a thorough DEI statement. And if you are able to fill out 2 to 3 pages of content, that indicates to the review committee that you have a vested interest in contributing to DEI on the campus of your future position. I also want to make a note that I am now serving on a search committee, so rest assured that my uh, advice here is from lived experience. Now, let's talk about what makes a okay versus an excellent DEI statement. An okay statement is prescriptive. I've lived here, I've been around this amount of people, and that I was a TA, and therefore I've had exposure to various backgrounds. This is all well and good, but these are all passive forms of contributions to DEI. Okay? Passive meaning you would have done these things regardless of the fact that you wanted to contribute or not, right? And so a great, excellent DEI statement is one that includes active and ways in which you sought out to contribute to DEI, in addition to opportunities that you would already be involved in, such as being a TA and such as studying internationally. So, actively being involved in a mentorship program, actively recruiting uh, diverse individuals from different backgrounds as part of your regular responsibilities, right? So we can tell the difference between I just so happen to make this contribution by virtue of my pre tenure experiences, or I have actively sought out these opportunities. The other thing that I want to recommend for your DEI statements is to take advantage of any online rubrics that are available to you. Specifically for my institution, we have a rubric available online for what we're looking for DEI statements. So it's in the candidate's best interest to follow that. Um, Last but not least, always be specific about what you want to contribute at your new institution if you're hired. What this means is that you're going to have to understand what the campus mission is for DEI, what they think is important, and what opportunities and programs are already in place that you may be able to jump in and contribute to once you get there. So it's sometimes not good enough that you've done a ton of DEI work before your tenure track position, but it's also beneficial to know specifically where you're going to contribute at that institution. That's going to require a level of investigation and a level of imagination. Or you can talk to someone that works at the institution, or a student that studies there, if you have friends there, to ask them what are the specific initiatives being carried out that you may be able to participate in. All right. Now, the next topic that I want to talk about is technical meetings or technical conferences. Okay. So we're in the fall semester. It's a pretty busy time for me and my students in regard to technical meetings. So I have a few best practices that I want to rattle off here. Number one, take advantage of the early bird rates. And that's early bird registration rates and early bird hotel block rates. Okay, so there's a discounted registration fee and oftentimes a discounted housing fee if you book early. And I hope I don't have to state the obvious, but all of these expenses should be covered by your PI or your department. The next thing I want to talk about is direct billing. Okay, so at least at my previous institution and my current institution, we are able to direct bill our airfare. And what that means is that we can use a code when we log into the travel coordinator website for my institution, and we can use that code and directly bill the charges for airfare to a designated account. As PI of my group, I actually go in and create those direct billing IDs for my staff. And so I usually try to do that about 6 weeks to a month ahead of the meeting. And what this does is it reduces the barriers, the resource barriers on your staff who are probably pretty low paid, right? So that they don't have to put forth too much money up front for conference fees. Unfortunately, housing, registration, and I think ground transportation are not allowed to be direct billed. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is networking. Okay, so if you are attending a conference that is directly related to your field, these are tremendous networking opportunities. And it's not just passing out a business card or schmoozing with someone that you think is important. That's networking of the past. What you can do at a technical meeting is match name to face of the person you've been citing over and over, the person whose papers are important for your current research, and then talking to that individual. So you've personified their papers, brought them to life by talking to them in person at a meeting. And I will say that returning to in-person conferences has reinvigorated my appreciation for in-person meetings for this reason. Um, it it there's no substitute for exchanging energy with people, and you can really get to know someone from a face-to-face conversation. This also helps for students to be more familiar with the literature when they can connect a face to the actual paper. Also, conference networking can also serve as informal peer review for the work that will soon be submitted for review in a journal article. So, if you're in the middle of doing research, you've got a project that is being conceptualized, being formulated, and you'd like some feedback from people that you know you may select as a reviewer for your work, go ahead and get the feedback at the meeting. And so this may make your peer review experience go a little bit better because you've already received that feedback ahead of time. The last thing I'm going to say about the benefits professionally for going to conferences is playing catch up. So, what I love to do at conferences is to immerse myself in other people's work so I can pretty much become more aware of what everyone is doing. And this is difficult for me to do by simply scanning the literature every week, every month or so. So, or every week. At these conferences, you spend about 4 to 5 days just immersing yourself in other people's work. And that's a really great time to catch up on what is at the frontier of your research field. Lastly, in regard to conferences, this is more on a personal note. It is extremely important, especially in 2022 when inflation is high and people are a little bit on edge, is to put safety first. So, not staying out all night in these cities where you're traveling to for conferences, um, walking in a group, and remaining vigilant about and disciplined about just going to the conference center and then going back to your hotel room. Um, Also, we are still grappling with the pandemic. And so it's very important to wear a mask in a conference because there are so many people attending the meeting. The likelihood of exposure to C19 is high. And so viral loads will be high because people have traveled, people have been exposed on an airplane. So it's extremely important to wear a high quality mask at these meetings. And also being careful about after conference activities because spread can be pretty volatile in leisure places around the conference. So, um, in restaurants per se. When you're going out of town, you don't know what the C19 culture is. You don't know whether or not people are vaccine hesitant. You don't know whether or not masking is deemed as important. And so your COVID risk is going to be a little bit different than at home. Okay. The next thing I want to discuss is imposter syndrome. Okay. So I had the pleasure of speaking to a group of students who serve as mentors on campus here at Berkeley, and imposter syndrome came up so much, more than I expected. And so I wanted to touch on imposter syndrome. For those of you that have not heard of this, this is the feeling of not being qualified for whatever it is that you've been hired to do. So, oftentimes, imposter syndrome can be exacerbated by microaggressions, meaning things that people say overtly or inadvertently that may reflect their opinion of your performance. They may think that you don't deserve to be there or that you haven't met certain qualifications for your job. And that can come out in a myriad of ways, right? Excluding you from opportunities for which you are rightfully meant to be a part of because of your expertise, or by outright telling you that you got your job because of XYZ identity. This can actually exacerbate imposter syndrome, but I'm about to debunk that at this moment. First of all, to combat imposter syndrome, I recommend that people establish a strong internal locus of control, a strong internal set of benchmarks for success. Okay? It's important for you to identify what's important to you and what you think is the optimal level of success for your career. Because if you haven't established that, anything anyone says surrounding what you do is going to hurt your feelings. So, if you've established what you think your metrics for success are at your career stage, you can easily tune out negative, unconstructive feedback. Now, I'm going to break down what's negative and what's unconstructive in just a second, but let me get through these internalized benchmarks, okay? When you hear something that's microaggressive about you, your career, your qualifications, I'd like for you to do one thing, and that's ask yourself a series of questions, okay? The first question is what they're saying true? Is it true? Do you believe what they're saying about you? If the answer is no, then likely what that person is saying to you is a microaggression. Likely what that person is saying to you is a projection of their own insecurities. In order for you to answer that question, you'll have to know deep down what your strengths and weaknesses are. Okay? All right. The next question that you may want to ask yourself is, does the person who's evaluating you, judging you, do you know them? And do they know you? Has this person spent a significant amount of time getting to know who you are, getting to know your journey, and getting to know your strengths and weaknesses? Therefore, put the onus back on that person to establish credibility in judging you. So if this person has no credibility in their ability to judge you, you may want to ignore the microaggression. Okay? And don't let yourself internalize feedback from people that really have no basis or a reference for evaluating your success, right? That goes back to having your own locus of control, your own standard of success. And number 3, ask yourself, has this person actually invested in my professional success? Okay. A lot of times you get one-off comments from people that you work with, whatever, and they've really never sat down with you to talk about your trajectory. They've never sat down to tell you how they truly feel about your work. They've never sat down to talk about how you can strategize and improve your career trajectory. And so what that indicates is that the person really doesn't have a vested interest in your success, and they have not invested in you. So how eager should you be to take advice from someone like that? Not at all. You need to take that advice with a grain of salt. Okay? I in particular, I don't listen to people who have not made a clear effort to constructively contribute to the positive trajectory for my success. All right? So those are things that you can ask yourself. Those are things that you can do in terms of your own standard of success to combat imposter syndrome. Okay? If you know that in your mind, these are the metrics that you want to meet in order to be the best academic, the best research PI, the best industry professional that you want to be, then it truly doesn't matter what other people think. It only matters what people who evaluate you for a living think, and people that have invested in your success. And the last part of this live stream is going to talk about misogynoir. Okay? Misogynoir is the hatred of women of color, specifically black people. Okay, black women. So I really want to speak on misogynoir in the last part of this video because it's been on my mind lately. And I just want to reiterate that we really have to be careful about projecting and acting on any internalized prejudices against women of color. Okay, so how does that show up? Well, it shows up in assumptions and prejudices about women of color that you don't even know. And unfortunately, because we have social media and because, people of color, especially women, have found social media to be a platform to express their own opinions, people are using that information to do very lazy and reductive judgments of women of color instead of getting to know them, knowing their history, knowing their backstory. And by skipping over the effort to get to know a person, people rush to judgment and they actually ignore that person's humanity and trivialize that person's whole being. And this is especially harmful for women of color because of the intersectional nature of the structural and collective barriers that we face in academia. So, other ways in which misogynoir show up is tokenizing women of color, meaning pointing to one particular person as the spokesperson or the person that will cover this specific area because of the assumption that there can only be one woman of color in that space. That is absolutely misogynoir. Instead of making room for all opinions from women of color, so that can be problematic. Playing into that tokenism and competing against other women of color in your space is absolutely misogynoir, and it's actually internalized misogynoir. And I think women of color can begin to overcome that by seeing other women of color as allies and collaborators and silent supporters in whatever way that shows up. We should be cheering each other on. Another way that misogynoir shows up is being overly comfortable with other women of color, meaning not relaying a level of respect in the workplace that would be automatically bestowed on someone from the majority group, right? So, one of my recommendations is to always refer to any woman of color you see as Dr. So and so. Err on the side of caution. And even if that person hasn't received their PhD, they'll let you know. But what it is oftentimes um, all too common for people to refer to professional women of color in a very disrespectful way because they're overly comfortable. All right. And last but not least, I would encourage everyone, um, women of color, anybody with a marginalized identity, if you happen to begin working with this person or you have to deal with other women of color in a professional capacity, is to reserve judgment. Okay? Reserve judgment. You don't know that person, and likely the journey for that professional woman of color, person with a marginalized identity, has been rocky. That person may have complex PTSD because of that journey. And so what we don't want to do is re-aggravate any of those stress points. And we want to show up as supporters and champions for people that are trying to thrive in spaces that were traditionally inaccessible to them. Okay. Well, this concludes my short office hour. I look forward to creating more content for you all. I've got one interview coming up that I think will be really useful. And I look forward to engaging with the Under the Hood audience in later posts. And with that, I will see you in the next one.